Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Clambaking to the end. We're back on the set of Clambake. 5 weeks of fun, and we're getting close to the end. We've heard from nearly everybody in the production. And today we're going to hear even more, just as soon as we return from this song that talks about Elvis on the Circle G, Threads and Dreams.
He wore a yellow shirt, black pants in the sun, rode horses through silence, then golf carts for fun. A ranch just 10 miles from the mansion's bright gate, where the myth met the morning and time learned to wait. George fixed the brickwork, the pipes in the ground, lit VP on shirt where no spotlight was found. Donna kept diaries, snapshots ahead of a father who labored, of a myth made by men. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place to be still when the world spun around. In the hands of the quiet, in the stitch of a scene, he carried the weight of a half-finished dream. The holster was worn, the leather was cracked, BP etched in thread, no glory attached. Mike shaped the saddle, the belt and the load, so Elvis could ride through a myth he adored. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place singing still, that courage spun out. In the hang out the fight, the mistakes on the sea, we drained the weight of the hurts and his teeth. Snowstorms in March to fairgrounds at night. He chased peace in motion and shadow and light. And Priscilla saw him silhouette aglow, breathing in twilight, steady and slow. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne, just laughter at breakfast, a place to call home. In the hush of the ranch, in the hands of the crew, they found what was real, and he gave it to you.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we are clam baking to the end. And Keith says that he's been watching EP sing and dance to clam bake, and he's moving very well with all of his co-stars and dancers in the scene, and that he looks very focused and energized, and that he watched an EP show with Bill Bixby from, I think it's like 1979, and that he's very upset with Bill. Might have been from the 1980s. But Marion agrees that Elvis was looking pretty good in the movie, although she's only seen some parts of it so far. And Marion's asking if the Bixby show is on YouTube. I'm positive that it is, but I don't have a link for it right off the top of my head. Maybe I can find one for us, but maybe I could also give Keith a reason that Elvis is looking very focused and energized, and at the same time, another reason to be upset with Bill Bixby that could be coming. But first, we're going to take a look at an artifact from the archive. And that is the original millionaire suit that Elvis Presley wore for Clambake. And somehow this suit represents the son of a millionaire. It's a stunning cream-colored shirt, pants, and jacket. The pattern is described as black arrows, but it's obviously baseball stitching. And that this suit was designed by the famous designer, Nudies, who had also designed other suits for Elvis, including the famous gold lame suit. The one that had the gold lame pants and the gold jacket. That was a Nudie. Just like this suit. Now, this is a suit that's based upon a real suit that Elvis obtained from the daughter of the owner of Western Costumes in Hollywood. So there are places in Hollywood where you would think, well, every studio's got a whole bunch of its own costumes. And like when I did theater when we were in high school, there was an area that was set off in this horrible second floor storage area that they kept what they called costumes in. And what they meant by that was they had a lot of old clothes that people would not buy at a thrift store. And these are what we used for costumes at the high school. Now, every theater has an area like this, and their clothing is somewhat similar. If you've ever been in a theater, you definitely have seen this area if you've ever been behind the scenes. Now, if you're lucky and you've been to a theater that is well off enough, they actually have a costume department. And there are people that could sew and alter costumes and even make them like completely from scratch. And they'll have a much bigger, nicer, probably more well-organized area that they store a lot of costumes in. The Hollywood studios, they recognized that there was money in these costumes. So they did have vast inventories, but they've never been good at controlling their inventory, managing it, organizing it. So if you wanted to make a really cheap movie, you could save a lot of money using only the costumes that were on set, that were on that studio's site. But if you wanted to spend some money and have everybody look appropriate, and probably much better, you would rent these costumes from these other places. That's all they did, was they rent costumes. There are other places that all they do is rent props. There's some that do both, but those are entire industries in Hollywood. Places that have been doing that for over 100 years now. So this is one of those places, Hollywood, or Western Costumes in Hollywood. And Elvis seems to know this daughter, and he likes this suit, but it's too small when he gets it, so he has it made one size larger. And I'm wondering if it was small enough at one point, or if it was the right size, and then we know that he had gained a little weight while he was out on the Circle G with the beautiful horses like we can see in the background. And maybe they'd had to quickly make a new suit. But I have no idea what the timeline of the making of this suit was. I do know that it sold in 2008 at auction for $110,000. And Keith says he bet that suit is hot to wear, and I would agree. And I would be afraid to wear it because it costs $110,000. And it's also got what you can't see it, but it's got a very small hole in the pants. It says where it would be hidden by the jacket and up near the belt. So the suit's actually slightly damaged, but still brought in $110,000. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Now, Will Hutchins, Elvis's co-star, the man who also wore that suit, or a suit that looked just like it. I don't know if he wore the same one. In the story, he wore the same one. As far as costumes, not positive. But I think there's a good chance he did. And Will Hutchins, he tells the story about the filming. And he says, in a nightclub scene, Angelica Pettyjohn entered in a singularly diaphanous gown. Before you could say Elsa Schiaparelli, Bill Bixby pulled Miss Pettyjohn's gown clear down to her knees, bearing all for the next day's rushes. So we had heard Red West, I'm thinking it was 3, maybe 4 episodes ago. So if you missed any of those previous episodes, be sure to go back into the archive and you can hear that full story. It's waiting for you back there. But Red told us that a lady had come out and Bill Bixby had pulled her halter top down, which is basically her brassiere or her bra. Like these ladies are on set in bikinis, pretty much. Now they're saying this one's a nightclub scene, but they're still scantily dressed. And Bill Bixby, we have now been confirmed, is the one who pulled off this bra or this gown or the clothing from the torso of this lady and left her naked. And the film was running. And that film gets sent off to other people to get developed and seen. At least Will is indicating that that's what's happened. That it's on that film for the rushes for the next day. Meaning that whoever develops the film will see it, they'll send it back, and then they'll all screen it in a room. The people who are working on the film, the producer, the director, possibly Elvis. Maybe another actor if they felt like they needed to see the rushes. A lot of them don't like to watch them. But it's not just an in-the-moment thing. It's recorded. And back then, people weren't recording every single moment of their lives like they do now. Not everybody had a camera on their phone. Nobody had a phone in their pocket. Let alone a camera. Cameras were large. They cost money to take pictures. You had to have the film developed. You had to buy the film. You had to have the equipment. So, this is being filmed. It's kind of a big deal. We had speculated earlier when we first heard the story, kind of because we don't like Red West, because we know in the end he betrays Elvis, that maybe he had been the one that did this, and it did somewhat fit with his character. There are other stories about Red treating women in a somewhat of a callous manner. But I think we were all shocked to hear it was Bill Bixby, but we've now had it confirmed. well, Bill did this. It's part of this atmosphere that's going on around set of this stag party, which is a bachelor party, meaning Elvis is sowing his wild oats before he goes to get married. It's also another indication Priscilla is nowhere around. If she is, she's not on set. But I am personally terribly shocked to hear this about Bill. And it doesn't fit with anything that I ever thought about Bill. But I only know Bill from My Favorite Martian and The Incredible Hulk. You know, really. And the Elvis special that he did. But really, The Incredible Hulk and My Favorite Martian. A lot of people know him from The Courtship of Eddie's Father. But I think even they would be shocked by this story. And I guess it's not really a shocking story these days, too. So that's another way to look at it. Another picture I've been able to summon out of the archive is this guitar. This is a Fender 12, and it was used by Elvis Presley in the film Clambaking. This is a 12 string, and the color, they call it Lake Placid Blue. And it was played in this film Clambaking, which was the last of 4 films that Elvis did for United Artists. Now, this particular guitar was given and owned by actor Lance Legault. It was given to him by Leo Fender. Now, Lance Legault is a special friend of Elvis. They met at the Crossbow Inn. And I've got a story about that. It's a very rare Elvis story, and it's on the channel. And if you've ever wondered how to get to the channel, you just gotta go right below this video and find the black circle that says Hillbilly Cat History, and it's got a gold outline of a cat. You click there, and you go to the channel, and the channel gives you choices. You can go to shorts, or lives, or posts, or videos. And if you go to the videos, you can find one that has a title about the Crossbow Inn. And it will tell you about how Elvis met Lance Legault, how he met Glenn Campbell, how he met Sandy, I want to say her last name is Ferreira, but she eventually married Wink Martindale and became Sandy Martindale, but she dated Elvis for a period. Sandy's father and mother, they owned the Crossbow Inn. Elvis ate dinner with them many times. Sandy's mother made Elvis dinner, and he loved it. It was Italian. And he ate with them in their private home. I'm sure he gave them many gifts, but what I know that he gave them for sure is a very nice set of silverware that had the initial E. And of course, this was true silver. And they kept it, I believe, their entire lives. But that story's told in that episode out on the videos. So if you'd like to hear it, it's waiting for you out in the archive. But Lance Legault, he was a special friend of Elvis's. He was a peer. He was a man who he was already breaking into success in the singing industry. Now, if you've ever heard Lance sing, I wouldn't say he's the greatest singer in the world, but that's how Elvis met him. Lance was performing at the Crossbow Inn, but Lance was also doing stuff in the movies. And if you've ever watched any 1980s anything, He was in all of that stuff, including stuff like the A-Team, Knight Rider, Battlestar, well, Buck Rogers. I know for sure he was in Buck. I think he was in Battlestar Galactica. He was in a whole bunch of made-for-TV movies. You will instantly recognize Lance if you ever see him. Lance, he was a stand-in for Elvis on certain movies, but he also helped Elvis develop choreography for those movies. Like, they would work together on them. They would build things together, different performances from bits of performances. They would weld those together and create a full performance for Elvis. And Lance would work with Elvis until they had it perfect. And Elvis was a perfectionist about that stuff, so he might do it a million times. Same way he would do his karate. And those performances that Elvis crafted with Lance, they're still in the movies that Lance helped him with. So Lance is a piece of all those movies. That's who Lance is. He's a very important person in Elvis's life. He's a true friend. He's never one of the inner circle because he never works directly for Elvis. If you've been following the karate series I've been doing, Ed Parker is similar to Lance, but Ed actually accepts money and works directly for Elvis for certain periods. Lance works with Elvis, but he's always contracted through the movies, through the studios. It's part of his career. When the job is done, he steps away. He does hang with Elvis and the guys from time to time, and they consider him to be, as close to the inner circle as you can possibly get. But he's not quite the same as any of the others. And of course, he doesn't spend long periods at Graceland or going back to Memphis or anything. He's really a Hollywood friend. But a peer, someone who does the same thing that Elvis does. And Elvis respects him for that. But this was his guitar, and he brought it to the set because Elvis really liked it. And you can see that it is special because it's got the 12 strings. So it's got this really tall piece on the end of the neck. It's striking and looks good on camera. And when Elvis was performing the title song, he retrieves this guitar and he plays it. So again, Lance is a piece of Elvis's movie. Now this guitar sold, I think it was 2012, for $35,000. So it's out there in the world. Somebody owns it. And I'm not sure who this lady is that's with Elvis, but this is on the set of Clambake. And Elvis has a great looking outfit on, maroon shirt. It looks like it has a slight, it's not a full turtleneck, but a slight neck on it. And it's ribbed, like maybe it's a sweater. But he's wearing a white jacket over it. He's wearing maroon pants. He's got a very fancy gold watch on. And the lady has some lime green pants. She's baring her midriff. Multicolored top that's very in stripes, which is very 60s. Got her hair back in a blue band. I'm wondering if this is Angelica Pettyjohn. But I'm not familiar with exactly who that is at this moment. Another thing I'll have to look up. And Charlie Hodge says in another scene, Bill Bixby was acting in front of the camera, and Elvis simply walked up to him and pushed a cream pie in his face. Pie started flying everywhere. Everybody came in for our practical jokes from the director on down to the coffee man. So at some point on this set, there was a giant cream pie fight, just like in the Three Stooges. In the first one, Elvis pushed into the face of Bill Bixby. Now, what I would really like to know, was this before or after Bill pulled the bra off of this woman? Was this like maybe Elvis getting some back on Bill for his bad behavior on the movie? Or was this from before and it sparked bad behavior from Bill? But it would be interesting to know the timeline on that. But it's also fun to think about Bill Bixby with a face full of cream pie. Will Hutchins, who we can see on screen, he said on his birthday, director Arthur Nadell got his cake smushed into his face in lieu of a custard pie. Elvis and his cronies shot off firecrackers at will, but I escaped. We get a little more information about what's going on set. We're either going to hear or we've already heard, I can't remember, that the director may have felt a little left out because he didn't get a pie in the face. But here on his birthday, they pushed the cake into his face instead of a pie. So he still got his in the end. But Elvis and the guys, they're running all over the place, lighting off firecrackers, which is extremely annoying if you've ever been around anyone that's done that. And sometimes it's terrifying. And sometimes it hurts, depending on where they throw that firecracker at and how close it is to you when it goes off. And I get the idea that they're throwing them towards people, and that's why Will's saying, I escaped. And Marion says, well done, Elvis, with the cake. Or perhaps with the pie to Bill Bixby's face. Charlie Hodge says the movie director, Arthur Nadell, had been hit by firecrackers so much that he started coming to the set wearing an old Nazi helmet. In one scene, Elvis goes to answer the phone. He says hello. Just then, Nadell lit a huge round firecracker and rolled it across the set floor at him. Elvis dropped the phone and yelled, "Oh, heck," and fled. So these guys have been running all over the set, throwing these firecrackers around. And the director's been a good sport about it. And Arthur, the director, is such a good sport that they start throwing firecrackers towards him. And it gets to the point that he shows up with an old Nazi helmet, which I'm sure is from the costume department. He's wrangled this old steel helmet and put it on his head. And I bet that set them off laughing. And I'm sure he did it as a joke when he came in. And so it sounds to me like they're having a lot of fun. And then he knows Elvis is going to go answer this phone for this scene, and he's bought this special big round firecracker. This isn't something that he got from one of the guys. He's brought this in on his own. He's joining the fun. And then he rolls this giant firecracker across the floor, and Elvis runs. Will Hutchins, he says, on the last day of the cast party, Elvis gave me a huge picture of himself in a red shirt. He signed it, "Help us out, Will, Elvis." "Help us out" is the catchphrase that Elvis and the guys were using during this period of time, which is a Southern way of saying help us out, help us out. And Will says, the picture was so big, I nailed it on the wall of my garage for all to see. So Elvis, he gives people jewelry, he gives them cars. To Will, he gives a giant picture of Elvis in a red shirt. And Marion says that she guesses firecracker battles are more of a guy's fun game, and that women prefer to flee for safety reasons into the house. Now, there is a story about Elvis and the guys back at Graceland having a firecracker battle. They used to fire bottle rockets at each other, as well as Roman candles, and they throw the firecrackers at each other. And Sonny West tells a story that they were firing some at him, and he dodged them. They missed. But they hit Graceland itself, and the next thing he knew, Graceland's on fire. So they had to run and get some buckets and a hose and put this fire out. They had to stop the battle for a few minutes so that they could save Graceland. So running into the house when Elvis is firing up the fireworks may not be safe. But may be safer than staying outside. Not sure. Charlie Hodge says the crew got their own back on Elvis one time, though. It was at the end of filming of That's the Way It Is. Arthur Nadell was the director on that one, too. And that's why I've included this quote from Charlie here, even though it's not about Clambake, because turns out Arthur was the director on That's the Way It Is. So Elvis must have liked Arthur, because that's an important movie for Elvis. But Charlie's saying that at the end of that movie, as soon as Arthur yelled rap, Elvis got hit, as did anyone around him, by hundreds of pies. It was mayhem, and there were so many pies hitting the floor that it became very slippery. People were falling like 10 pins. Even though he was the victim of the practical joke this time, Elvis loved it. When Charlie says people were falling like 10 pins, it's a reference to bowling, where there's 10 pins that you have to knock over with the ball. So they're falling like the pins of a bowling game. But Elvis gets hit by hundreds of pies from the cast and crew. So obviously there have been some other pie throwing, I think we can assume, during the filming of That's the Way It Is. Will Hutchins, he said that Elvis was two sides to the coin. He was a jokester, a prankster, and he had his quiet moments of reflection. To me, he wasn't at all like his public persona of king. He was a commoner, and I meant that in the best possible sense. He never forgot his roots, and he never acted the star. So Will sees that there's two sides to Elvis. There's a fun-loving side, and there's a quiet side, a more serious side. and that he's a person that will talk to you like another person. He never forgot his roots. He's a commoner. He's not above anybody. He's not the king. He's not the star. He's your co-worker on this production, and he's interested in you doing well, and that he does well, and that as a team, you do well together. And that's who Will Hutchins grew to know Elvis to be as he worked with him on 2 different movies. And Marion saying that she'd never heard that Graceland was on fire. Well, it was just for a minute. It was just on the first floor and kind of on the outside. And they got it put out, so everything was okay. I believe there was a small bit of damage that had to be repaired. Will Hutchins says, behind Elvis's mischievous eyes, I sensed an abiding melancholy. I figured he'd grown weary of making the same flick over and over and over. Sort of like the myth of Sisyphus. A guy pushes a huge boulder up a steep hill throughout eternity, only to have the boulder elude him and roll down to the bottom. I figured Elvis was saddened by the emergence of the Beatles and their rise to the top. So Will, he has fun with Elvis, but he senses that Elvis is much deeper, and that Elvis, there are things that are bothering Elvis. To Will, it comes across as an abiding melancholy. And Will doesn't know why it was, but Will thinks that if he were Elvis, it would be because he had to keep making the same movie over and over. And that's kind of a strange thought coming from Will, because in a way, he was in a show, a television show, Sugarfoot. And in a way, when you make a television show like that, you make the same little movie over and over and over. The plot barely changes, especially at that period of time in television. Your character never grows because you have to be the same at the end of the show as you were at the beginning, because they had not thought of episodic television then. It was all standalone stories. You couldn't have an arc of any kind, because then people would have to watch the show in order. And no one had ever even thought about syndicating anything. But when syndication came up, there became these questions of, should the people who rented the syndication, should they be required to show this in order? But they don't have to, because they weren't made that way. And they weren't made that way because they never knew who had television or when they were going to watch or when they'd start watching your program. So the idea was every show would be self-contained, every segment, every episode, and therefore people could start within your series anywhere. And it didn't matter whether they saw reruns or new shows, they would all be new to them. It still makes sense, and they wouldn't need to know which one came before or after. But Will sees that Elvis is melancholy about something, and that's what he puts forward, is he thinks it might be about that. And then he compares Elvis to a mythological figure, which is this legend of this, it's a titan, or I guess it's a man, but he's been sentenced basically for eternity. He's got to keep pushing this big rock up a hill, but he will never get it to the top of the hill. It will always roll down to the bottom before he gets done, he will have to start over, and he cannot stop until it gets to the top. So he's trapped like that for eternity. And Will sees a reflection of that myth in Elvis's life. Will also doesn't know about the emergence of the Beatles and their rise to the top, and if that saddened Elvis, he just thinks that if he were the king of rock and roll, if music was his gig, then he'd kind of feel saddened by that. So maybe Elvis does feel that way, but it doesn't appear that Elvis talked to him about that. This is just Will's empathy and his statements of why, you know, as a fellow artist, he would think that Elvis might be sad. But he doesn't know that Elvis is about to get married to someone that he may not want to get married to. He doesn't know that Elvis is being kept away from a ranch where he's building a dream and that's where he really wants to be. He doesn't know that Elvis is at the very end of a long series of contracts with these movies. Or that Elvis is actively thinking and planning and preparing himself to move or on or to take advantage of an opportunity that shows up. Charlie Hodge says, with Elvis, life was great. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. Happy coffee. So Charlie lets us know that all the time, life was great with Elvis. And Charlie was with Elvis for a long time. He did come and go, but mostly he was there. Will Hutchins says, we are all onions. No one ever came close to peeling away Elvis's multi-layers to get to his rich core. I think that's a beautiful quote by Will. We're all onions. Will's telling us that we've all got a lot of layers. And to each and everybody else, they can only see the outer layer. And no one has ever come close to peeling away Elvis's multi-layers to get to his rich core. That as much as we know every layer we've ever known about Elvis, Will's telling us you haven't even hit the core. Not even close yet. You're still in all the outer layers. And I think Will's got a very good chance of being correct. Now, Will, this is the last movie that he does with Elvis. And he never really reconnects with Elvis again. But I want us to learn a little bit more about Will. Because I think once we know a little bit more, we're going to see why Elvis would have found Will's company enjoyable. Why they would have had a good time on set together. And how possibly Will could have become part of the inner circle if things had been slightly different. Maybe Elvis would have offered that to him, because I see a lot of similarities between them. But I think at the moment that Elvis knew Will was on a rising wave. He was going to the top. Now, bad things happened for Will. But he was moving forward quickly when Elvis knew him. So for Elvis to try to have pulled him into the inner circle at that moment would have destroyed Will's career. And it looked like Will's career was going to be incredible. So Will was born, this was his real name, Marshall Lowell Hutchinson, on May 5th, 1930. Will's film debut was at the age of 10, when he was an extra in the W.C. Fields' 1941 comedy, Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, which was shot on Glendale Boulevard in Los Angeles. So Will was just a kid, but he lived in the Los Angeles area, and he knew that they often shot films in this one area. And he found out about W.C. Fields filming this comedy there at the time. And so he went down there with his buddy. And he proudly tells this story. You can find some clips of him on YouTube talking that they got to be extras in this film. And he can point out the scenes, if you ever watch the film, of where he's at. This would have been a big deal for anybody at the time, but especially a kid in Hollywood. So that's how Will got interested back when his name was Marshall in doing the movies. He later served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, which would have been the early 1950s. That's where Cousin Junior went, Elvis's Cousin Junior. Elvis's Cousin Junior came back somewhat of a broken individual. Will came back doing much better. But that war was hard on a lot of people, and Will was in on it. He was one of the guys that was in the Army at that time. And after appearing on TV as Sugarfoot, which was in the late 1950s, Will received top billing in the 1966 film The Shooting, which co-starred Warren Oates and Jack Nicholson. Now, I'm sure all of us know Jack Nicholson today. He was the Joker in the first Batman movie, done a million other things. Jack is super famous. The Shining, where he says, well, I don't even remember his catchphrase. Here's Johnny, I think is the one from The Shining. But he's been in so many movies. Excellent actor. Warren Oates is big as well. But at the time they did this movie, they weren't that big. Now, when Will was doing Sugarfoot, that would have been the exact same time period that Elvis was rising to national fame, and then while Elvis was off in the Army. Will's pretty much doing Sugarfoot through all of that. And then he goes and does this movie, The Shooting, and Will talks about this movie once to an interviewer, and he says, "It was a de facto honeymoon. I had married my first wife, who was Carol Burnett's younger sister, Chrissy Burnett. So I bet a lot of you know Carol Burnett. And I'm not sure, I didn't know Carol had a sister named Chrissy, but Will was married to her." And Will says, "It was a de facto honeymoon. I had married my first wife in New York when I was doing the play Never Too Late. I had replaced Orson Bean in the lead role." Orson Bean is another famous actor. The way that I know Orson Bean is that he was the voice of Bilbo Baggins in the cartoon The Hobbit by Rankin Bass in, I think it was 1978. Might have been 77, but the late 70s. And it was a cartoon of J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And Orson sang and was Bilbo Baggins. But Will replaced him in this play in New York. Now, when they say play, I'm assuming that means Broadway. He doesn't say Broadway, but that's typically what that means. But it may just mean an off-Broadway theater in New York. Will goes on. He says, "I did it for 2 years, and when it folded, I went right into The Shooting. My wife came along. We shot the film about an hour outside of Kanab, Utah. on an old Western town set that was built for Frank Sinatra film Sergeants 3. And that had been in 4 years earlier in 1962. And Will goes on, I got top billing in the shooting because I was better known at the time than the rest of the cast. Jack Nicholson and Warren Oates weren't well known. Millie Perkins was famous for The Diary of Anne Frank. It took a long time for the film to come out. But when it did, Jack Nicholson was the star, and then Warren Oates. So Will's telling us that they filmed this movie, and he got top billing in the movie, but the movie didn't get released right away. And by the time it was released, Jack Nicholson was much more famous than Will. And so the people who were going to see the movie then, they were going to see it for Jack Nicholson, even if he wasn't getting top billing. And then later on, even Warren Oates is more famous than Will, is the way Will sees it. And Will says, I saw it recently on TCM, and all that Ben Mankiewicz talked about was Jack, Millie, and Warren. So Will has what must be somewhat of a surreal experience. He sees the movie on Turner Classic Movies on television. And Ben Mankiewicz is the guy that's hosting the film. And he keeps talking about the other three people that are in the film. The three people who were not top billed. Jack's top billed, or Will's top billed, but Ben never mentions Will. So it's almost as if he's not even in the movie, even though he's watching himself in the movie. And Will goes on and says, just before the picture started, Ben said, oh yes, with Will Hutchins. Anyhow, I enjoyed working on the shooting a lot. It was a beautiful script written by Carol Eastman, whose brother had a bit part in the movie. I remember one day I went back to Warner's to try out for a movie by Francis Ford Coppola. I didn't get the part. And the guard at the gate says, Sugarfoot, is that you? Have you learned to ride a horse yet? I should have said to him, go see the shooting. I rode my guts out in that one, praying all the way that my horse wouldn't step into a gopher hole. I rode like the wind. Will played a famous Western character, Sugarfoot. And when he comes back to the studio, after not playing this part for a while, the guard kids with him, hey, you ever learned to ride a horse yet? That's very funny. And Anna says that Jack Nicholson is one of her favorite actors. And Luann saying, Carol Burnett, I watch her weeknights. She's a very funny lady. And so she's got a sister hidden away. Yeah, and the sister used to be married to Will. Now, they didn't stay married, but they were married at one point. And Marion agrees with Anna that Jack Nicholson is brilliant. And Luann agrees that Jack was a good actor. Watched one of his movies, but can't remember the name. He's got a lot of them. And he's got some crazy eyebrows in almost all of them. Let's go forward through a few pictures here. Will appeared in the Elvis Presley movies Spin Out and Clambake. After Clambake, Will fell on hard times. His life savings was embezzled by a business manager, and he was unable to find more work in Hollywood. Will worked hard to make ends meet, but nothing seemed to work out in his career or his personal life. So this would be through the 1970s. Will was having a very hard time. And Marion says, fun fact, the first female silent movie star's real name was Gladys Smith. Elvis read this in a book that Larry gave him. Well, that's interesting. We're going to have to find that book now, right? And Luann laughs about Jack Nicholson's crazy eyebrows. But I'm right, though, right? Like, he got some crazy eyebrows. But Will was having a hard time in the 70s and into the early 1980s. And of course, Elvis was gone by the late 70s, so even if Elvis had ever found out, he would never have been able to help Will. It was too late. But in 1983, romance sparked between Will and Barbara Torres. He had known her from before, and they had dated before, but they rekindled, they met again, and a romance rekindled between them. And with her help, Will rebuilt his life. And Barbara, whom Will always called Babs, she encouraged him to take a job as a shipping and receiving clerk at NBC. And he worked at that job for 12 years. So he basically left Hollywood, although he was working for NBC, so he left the entertainment part of Hollywood, and he became part of the business machinery of Hollywood, shipping and receiving, a steady, dependable job. And he did that for 12 years. And Will says, I owe my success to three ladies in my life: my mother, Jane, my daughter, Jenny, and my wife, Babs. And I think that Elvis would have really appreciated this statement, and that it shows a similarity in thought that would have drawn Elvis to Will, that Will loves his mother Jane and his wife Babs and his daughter Jenny. But we know that Elvis, he loved his mother Gladys Smith. Gladys loved Smith Presley more than anyone on earth. And so he would have identified with what Will is saying here. And at this moment in time when they know each other, this, what Will says here, is what Elvis is seeking: the wife and the daughter or other children. Will Hutchins passed away at the age of 94 on April 21st, 2025. That was this year, just a few months ago, at North Shore University Hospital in Manhasset due to respiratory failure. His wife, Barbara Babs Hutchins, she said, he was the love of my life. Even with everything, he kept his sense of humor, all of his hair, and most of his marbles. He was hysterical. Everyone loved him. He had a great sense of humor, and it never gave up on him. I'm going to flip through some pictures here because I've got at least one I want us to see before the end of the episode, and that's this one. This is Will and his wife, Babs. And Will said, Elvis was the best person I ever worked with. It was just laughs, laughs, laughs. And with that, we say goodbye to Will Hutchins. And we end this episode. We'll talk a little bit more about Clambake probably in the next episode. But then we're going to wrap it up and be moving on rapidly to a wedding that's coming up fast. But I'm going to leave you all today with this song about Elvis's generosity. And you all keep on taking care of business while Elvis, he gave away his heart.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian soup, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke and sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, hid the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned so bright.